How's it going, everybody? It's Young here with a Death Stranding analysis. The following theory was brought to my attention by Reddit user the Aiden19, who recently posted a thread in which he talks about the possibility that the handcuffs seen in Death Stranding's trailers may represent the PlayStation 4's DualShock 4 controller. The theory sounds crazy at a glance, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you really think about it. One of the most interesting aspects of Death Stranding's handcuffs is the way that one of the cuffs, the one that isn't attached to anything, lights up blue on the interior. This is seemingly such an important aspect of the game that the first trailer lingers on the handcuffs' blue light flickering on before finally shifting its focus on Norman's character. Now, this function of the handcuff might seem familiar to you if you own a PlayStation 4. After all, when you turn the system on alongside the DualShock 4 controller, as the controller syncs to the system, the controller's light bar blinks a light blue color for a few moments before turning into a solid blue by default. The similarities become even more apparent on the PlayStation 4 Slim's DualShock 4 controller, which features a transparent slit on the plastic of the touchpad that emits a thin, front-facing light that blinks with a light blue color when turned on and syncing to a PS4 before turning into a solid blue. Visually speaking, it's uncanny to the handcuffs' behavior as seen in the first Death Stranding trailer. So the working theory is that the similarities in the way both the one cuff and the DualShock 4 controller blink and light up blue could indicate a direct connection between the two devices, that the cuff is a symbolic in-game representation of the DualShock 4 itself. More importantly, this could indicate a direct and literal connection between Norman's character and the player. Perhaps this is Kojima's way of saying that the entity who Norman is cuffed to is none other than us, the players, the Ludens, those who play, beings from a higher plane of existence who are not physically in the game world, but interact with it via the DualShock 4 controller, our cuff that connects us players from the real world to Norman from the game world. If you're still not sold on this theory, notice how in the first trailer, as Norman's character lies on the ground, it's only once the blue light on the handcuffs blink and turn on that he finally wakes up and begins to move. What if this is representative of the player turning on their PlayStation 4, which I might add also blinks blue when turned on, syncing their controller to the system, resulting in the blinking light bar, and booting up the game? What if we're seeing Norman come back to life from a state of stasis as the player's DualShock 4 controller blinks and establishes a connection with the PlayStation 4 system, the game, and in turn, the character, with the blinking lights on Norman's cuff being an in-game visual representation of real-world happenings. This concept of players being cuffed to an in-game character from a higher plane of existence also makes sense from a meta perspective. When you're playing a game, the act of holding a controller could be constituted as being cuffed to the video game you're playing and the player character you're controlling, as holding a controller physically restricts one's range of activities, like how being cuffed to another individual wrist by wrist can restrict range of activities. In both cases, the two individuals have to be in close proximity to each other and move in sync with one another to achieve anything. Now, obviously, with video games, you can pause any time and put the controller down, or momentarily take the cuffs off, if you will. But anytime you want to come back and interact with a game again, you have to pick up the controller and re-establish the link with your character. You have to put the handcuff back on, so to speak. So yeah, perhaps the handcuffs seen in Death Stranding are in-game manifestations of this idea that game controllers fully bind and connect players, the Ludens, to the player character during gameplay. Something else to keep in mind is that Death Stranding is a PlayStation 4 exclusive, so it makes sense for Kojima to use PlayStation 4 exclusive hardware features like the consoles and the controller's light bars to break the fourth wall. He's already done something like this in the past, with the most noteworthy example being the PlayStation 1 exclusive Metal Gear Solid, in which he made use of hardware features like the memory card, the DualShock's rumble system, and the ability to switch between controller ports to produce the fourth wall breaking Psycho Mantis boss battle. A more recent example is PT, in which players had to insert a headset into the DualShock 4's headphone jack and speak directly to the game to complete it. So with all that in mind, who's to say that Kojima won't immerse players into the game by cleverly manifesting the PlayStation 4 and DualShock 4's unique hardware features into Death Stranding in symbolic, fourth wall breaking ways. Add on top of all that, the fact that Kojima has already confirmed he'll be breaking the fourth wall, the fact that we have heard Norman Reedus say that players won't just play as him, but rather be him, suggesting that players will be directly inserted into the game's narrative and gameplay, and the fact that the main theme of Death Stranding is connections, whether it's within the same realm or across different dimensions or different planes of existence. And all of a sudden, the idea of Death Stranding's handcuffs serving as visual means to establish a direct connection between Norman and the player in fourth wall breaking fashion, even across different realities, doesn't seem impossible. Now, assuming that all of this is true, this raises some interesting implications regarding Guillermo's character, who is wearing identical handcuffs as Norman. Could it be that Guillermo is planned to be a playable character to some extent? Does his handcuff also link to a DualShock 4 controller, or a Luden, aka a player? I do want to point out that Guillermo's handcuff constantly emits a solid blue light rather than blinking on like Norman's handcuff. This can likely be attributed to the fact that unlike Norman, who begins inactive, Guillermo's already up and about from the moment he enters the trailer's frame. So it could be that for Norman, the player just booted up the PlayStation 4, the controller, the game, but for Guillermo, the player has been playing the game and had their controller on for quite some time. It all seems to match up with the idea that one of the cuffs here is a representation of the DualShock 4, the cuff that connects the player to the game. So, long story made short, the theory basically states that Death Stranding's handcuffs are meant to be an in-game manifestation of the connection between us Ludens from the real world and the characters from the game world. The handcuff emitting the blue light represents the DualShock 4 controller, both of which blink blue when establishing a connection, and it's us the players who are at the other end of the handcuffs being worn by the in-game characters. But we are not physically there in the game world, we're not physically wearing the in-game cuffs. We are beings from a higher plane of existence, our real world. And in our plane, the cuff that links us to the in-game characters is the DualShock 4 controller. Our portal to the game world is the controller, and their portal to the real world is the handcuff. Obviously, this is all theory and speculation, so take all this with a grain of salt. But this is all pretty compelling stuff if you ask me. What are your thoughts on the matter? Does the blinking blue lights on both Death Stranding's handcuffs and the PlayStation 4's console and controller indicate some kind of fourth wall breaking connection, or are we looking too deeply into this? Let us know in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things Death Stranding, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!